What historical events are so absurd that they would be too strange for a fiction story or a movie? Wojciech, the soldier bear. He served in the Polish army in World War II, helping his fellow soldiers by carrying heavy crates of ammunition into battle, saving precious time during combat. He had been recruited as a soldier when his division had to board an English ship which didn't allow animals on board. Outraged, the Polish then made him a soldier and he lived through the war to die of old age in a zoo in 1963. I got one for you. Ex-Nazi and cult leader pedophile Paul Schaefer was so obsessed with having the children of his compound, Colonia Dignidad, love him and only him that he once took all of the children of the compound to a river where he had someone dressed as Santa Claus floating on a raft. He then shot and killed Santa, in front of all the children and told them all that Santa's dead. The only holiday we ever need to celebrate here is my birthday. The Spanish conquistadors found platinum during their search for gold, and dumped all of it in the sea, because they thought platinum was inferior to silver. Battle of Caransebes. That time in the 1700s when the Austrian army got confused, waged a huge battle against itself within its own lines, and lost an estimated several hundred to few thousand men, and a lot of equipment and money, in the process. They then retreated. The Ottomans, whom they were originally intending to fight, showed up 2 days later. The latrine disaster of Erfurt. In 1184, the King of Germany Heinrich VI, held court in the Petersburg citadel in Erfurt. On the morning of July 26, the weight of the assembled nobles caused the wooden second-story floor of the Peterskirche to collapse. Most of them fell through into the latrine cesspit below the ground floor and about 60 of them drowned in liquid excrement. The Toronto Circus Riot of 1855. The fire department and some clowns get into a disagreement at a whorehouse, and get into a punch-up. The clowns win, but the firemen return to the circus later and start attacking in revenge. The firemen win the day but violence is stopped when the militia come in. The police do nothing, so the city fires all the police, and I mean everyone, and starts a new police force. Douglas Bader. RAF flying ace, 23 kills, though he had previously lost both his legs in separate flying accidents. He wore a pair of clunky tin legs. He was shot down over France in 1941. The Luftwaffe were so pleased to have captured him they arranged for the RAF to drop a pair of his legs at a designated time and place, and cleared the sky for the drop to proceed. The RAF did indeed drop the legs as arranged, but since all German fighters and AK had been stood down as arranged, it seemed a waste not to bomb a nearby enemy airfield. Meanwhile, Bader stumping about on his tin legs, was a great hit with his Nazi captors. At a great party held by the Luftwaffe in his honor, he drank them under the table, excused himself to a third-floor bathroom, shinned down a drainpipe and stumped off into the darkness. He was only recaptured by a German spy in the resistance. For the next 4 years he continually escaped and was recaptured until he was finally sent to Colditz. After the war, there was a great spirit of reconciliation and togetherness between the air forces on both sides. Bader was not convinced. He was invited to address a crowd of assembled now ex-Luftwaffe pilots and began his speech with the words, "Seeing so many of you here today, I am struck by the single thought, I didn't kill enough of you bastards." Back in the 1780s, after being elected president, George Washington decided to send a letter to Congress that basically said, "Hey, looking forward to working with y'all, this will be exciting." However, George wasn't very eloquent, and was generally busy and stressed, so he asked his friend James Madison to compose the letter to Congress, which James did. When Congress received the letter, they decided to respond in kind, not wanting to slight the new president. They wanted to send back a letter that essentially said, "We're glad you're excited, so are we." They decided there was no one better in Congress to write the letter than their very own, James Madison. So, James writes a response to the letter he wrote in the first place, and Congress sends it to George. George decided to respond with something along the lines of, "Oh, good, I'm excited that you're excited, too." And since his buddy James did such an excellent job with the first letter, George again went to him and had him compose the response. Congress received the letter and, again not wanting to be awkward and ignore the president, decided to reply with yet another letter that basically said, "Hey, we're excited that you're excited that we're excited," and once again, they had James Madison compose the response. So James Madison, future 4th President of the United States, wound up writing himself 4 letters back and forth between George Washington and Congress, and was too embarrassed to tell anyone about it while it was going on. Hitler, Tito, Stalin, Trotsky, and Freud were living in the same Vienna neighborhood in 1913. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died on the same day. The day? The 50th anniversary of the 4th of July. Adams's last words were, "Thomas Jefferson still survives." Juan Pujol Garcia. World War II spy who won both the German Iron Cross and Order of the British Empire for spying. He initially approached British intelligence and offered his services, and was refused. Undeterred, he created the persona of a loyal Nazi supporter, became a German agent, gathered a payroll of fake sub-agents, all bankrolled by Germany, persuaded the German Navy to chase a fake convoy, then finally got recruited by the Allies. He finally fed misleading info to the Axis about the D-Day landings, causing them to deploy forces to the wrong locations, even after the invasion had begun. My personal favorite, the cadaver synod, in which the dead body of a former pope was disinterred, propped up on the throne, and then formally tried by the church to have his papacy retroactively annulled. Predictably, he was found guilty. Then they chucked his corpse in the Tiber. People are funny animals. You're missing some of the best details. They propped the corpse, which had been decaying for about 7 months at that point, up on the throne of the Pope. They then assigned someone to stand next to the corpse Pope to lean in and listen to him and then answer the questions on his behalf. After they chucked the corpse in the river, it washed up a little while later and people started claiming it could perform miracles because it's the Pope, so why not? This is kind of the reason that, despite being a registered organ donor, the Pope can't have his organs harvested. This also turned public opinion against the living Pope, Stephen IV, because Formosa's crimes had been political and most everyday Catholics didn't really know or much care about it. All they knew was he was the Pope who was very important and his corpse had been desecrated. So Stephen got arrested for it and someone strangled him in prison. A guy broke into the Prime Minister of Canada's house with a knife, intent to kill the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's wife hears someone walking around downstairs and tries to wake her husband. The PM just tells her it's nothing, go back to sleep. She gets up and investigates, finding the knife-wielding assassin. She grabs an Inuit statue of a loon and beats the shit out of the guy. Our PM then runs into the hall and helps his wife take down the assassin. These are 2 people in their 60s just kicking the shit out of some dude in his late 20s. She calls the local police, who arrive, only to realize they forgot the fucking key to the front gate, so they send someone back to the station get it. The assassin was later confirmed to have major mental health issues. Less than 5 years later, he was successfully treated for his schizophrenia, released from his treatment facility and formally apologized to the couple. May have been said already, but when Napoleon returned to France from his exile, a regiment of French soldiers were sent by the coalition powers to intercept him. Upon seeing them, Napoleon approached and simply said, "If you wish to kill your emperor, here I am." The commander of the regiment ordered his men to open fire. Out of the 2,000 soldiers present, not a single one obeyed the order. They all joined Napoleon and marched to Paris with him. Truly a real-life Mary Sue. At least until he was thoroughly beaten and exiled again, permanently this time. Maybe not an event, but pretty absurd. In an attempt to claim control of the former Spanish Empire's territories in the Americas, the French ruler, Napoleon III, created the term Latin America. Because if the territories were Spanish, or formerly, then the French had no right to them, but if he got the world to call it Latin, which the French were considered a branch of, then Napoleon III could attempt to take them for a new, glorious, French Empire. This would also reassure the British, US, and Dutch that he was not going after their American territories, since they were not Latin countries. In other words, we call Hispanics of the Americas Latin because it was French propaganda used to legitimize their rule over South and Central America. Edit: forgot to mention this would also affect former Portuguese holdings, Brazil, and lost French territory, Haiti and whatnot. Not just the Hispanic territories. Edit 2, turns out Napoleon III only popularized the term. It had existed a few years before he latched onto it. So, although he didn't coin the term, he is the one that made it popular. The last known kill by bow and arrow in combat was actually during the Battle of Dunkirk, 1940. Jack Churchill landed a well-placed arrow into a German soldier's chest. He also chose to carry bagpipes, and a Scottish long sword. Operation Acoustic Kitty. In the 60s the CIA spent months and tens of millions of dollars to surgically bug and then train a cat to sit near foreign officials in order to transmit their private conversations to CIA operatives. The day of the first official test run they release the cat, it wanders into the street and is promptly hit by a taxi. Roman Empire declaring war on Neptune, the god of water, they just went and stabbed the water. Just about every Cold War CIA propaganda operation. Airdropping condoms that are XXL with labels that say small over the Soviet Union. Trying to make a gas that turns you gay. In WW2, British commandos filled a ship with explosives, tried to sail incognito into Germany's largest dry dock but was discovered and fired upon by all the shore batteries. The ship started getting hit again and again, and any single hit could detonate the explosives. They somehow managed to sail the ship at full speed straight into the gate of the dry dock, propelling the ship halfway out of the water and getting it stuck on the gate, making it impossible to tow it away. A small task force then attacked the dock facilities before retreating back, but sadly the ship didn't explode as the timer had failed. The next day a bunch of German officers and officials came to examine the British ship. Meanwhile, half a mile away captured commandos were being tortured for information. To them their mission had failed and now they were facing some brutal treatment. The explosives on the ship suddenly detonated. The explosion was massive, it destroyed the dock, hundreds of soldiers that were sent to secure the dock, and killed all the German officers and officials that had come to inspect it. Those being tortured heard the explosion and got to have the last laugh. I've always wondered why it was never made into a film. There's so many twists and turns, and when you think it's all over there's one more big twist. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in more Reddit content. See you in next video.